Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Christian Cornerstone Podcast. We're here giving part 2 of a 3-part series, Halloween in the Christian Faith. Last week we talked a little bit about the origins of Halloween. We're going to talk about that a little bit more, possibly into detail. And then as we wrap up next week, we're going to be going over the biggest question of all. Should the Christian celebrate Halloween? And if so, how, or what practices are safe? So if you enjoy those, if you enjoy listening to this and you like hearing a bunch of theological discussions and rants and all this stuff, please do consider checking us out. You can subscribe to us on YouTube by going to our YouTube channel, which if you're watching this video, you do have access to that. You can also check us out on Facebook. Go to Christian Cornerstone is our page if you're looking on your browser, facebook.com/Christian Cornerstone 89. You can also check us out on our website. It's following up top, christiancornerstone.org. We have an entire archive on there. If you enjoy these, please do consider becoming a financial subscriber to help this ministry grow. You can also participate in other means as far as volunteer work. Join up on our podcast and whatever else you might have. If you feel called to get into ministry and to help support this ministry in any way possible, please do get a hold of us and we can see what we can do. With that being said, we're going into episode numero dos. This is talking about the practices, and joining me today is the lovely Tammy, throwing out some funky faces, something else Giberson. I'm not really sure how I'm going to go off with that. Tammy, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I got a bag full of Ricolas open and ginger ale, so I'm better than I was at 9 o'clock this morning.
Awesome. Just for the record, so you don't feel under the bus, or so I don't feel like I'm throwing stuff that's you're not expecting, you are currently on screen. So, yes, people can see your lovely face.
Poor thing. Oh, well, and then if I'm visual, let's warn folks that I have 2 cats. They are capricious. And there's a very good chance that this tail might just do one of these
right across the screen. I'm just gonna go ahead and mosey along this, and I don't care if you guys are on camera or anything. I'm gonna do my own thing, that kind of thing, right? Just kind of like I'm sitting right about in this place.
Well, the first YouTube video I ever made for my channel, I was actually going to do this really cool teaching on the widow of Maine, and I had submitted it as a paper for college, got an A. I thought, well, this would be a cool video. So I get the camera up, and right as I get started, Froggy just like, hey. Cool. So my intro video to the channel is not this great teaching on the widow of Maine. That's the second one. It's actually a minute and a half of me introducing my cat's backside to the world.
Awesome.
Yeah. He's sitting here looking because he knows.
Yeah. See, like, I'm a fan. Like, my girlfriend asked me over this weekend about that. I'm personally not a big cat fan. Let me rephrase that. Cats and dogs, for personal interest, if I was to have one, it would not happen. Now, if I go to somebody else's house and they've got a dog or a cat, I'm totally cool with it. Now, cats to me start off as irritating because they do what they want. But, I'll warm up to it, and I'll be like, hey, go ahead and just plop your butt right here in my lap. It's awesome. Continue doing what you were doing for the rest of your life. But I'll warm up to them pretty good. As far as personal interest, I like differences. And in fact, I actually have a bearded dragon, which totally grosses Amanda out. And I find a lot of humor in that. So last week we went over a little bit of the origins of Halloween. We went over, where does it really come from? I guess that's really where the origins are. The start of this stuff. We went a little bit over some of these things, in which we'll be talking a little bit more, I would presume, in depth a little bit more. Some notes here. I've just got like a paragraph of these myself. It's kind of, you've done a little bit more of a study on this. So I was a little curious what else you had to share, if not more, on these issues. And some of these issues you gave me was trick-or-treating, otherwise known as souling. Right. Jack-o'-lanterns. That one, actually, I've got a little commentary on that, which you're probably even going to throw in there as well. But that one I looked up briefly this morning. I thought that was actually kind of interesting what I found out about this. And if people want to Google this, Will o' the Wisp.
Yeah, okay, you got some of the good stuff.
Yeah, that's the only bit that I looked a little bit into that. But before I forget here, I already did forget. Those of you who are watching this video here, you can check down to the bottom of the video. you'll see Christian Leaders Institute logo. That's actually the most beautiful shirt I've ever seen.
Comes in blue.
Yeah, well, we have a lovely lady here promoting that. Christian Leaders Institute is actually a affordable, if not free, Christian education, biblical education, and I believe they throw some other things in there as well. Both me and Tammy met on the Christian Leaders Institute social network. They've got a little private community for their students to interact with each other. And I want to encourage you guys, if you feel called to get into any sort of, or if you just want to even further your education, check this out. Check out Christian Leaders Institute, because you can essentially, this is personally what I'm going for, I'm sure they have other stuff as well, you can get your theological degree on what I'm going for is a bachelor's. First thing I'm going for is associates. Well, I guess that's pretty much the first thing you have to go for. But anyways,
diploma, but yeah,
I'm
2 classes away from diploma.
Are you? But yeah, you can get your I can't even talk right now. Degree in divinity. What are you going for? Is that what you have there, or are you going a different angle, Tammy?
I'm just going for the diploma of ministry.
Okay.
Because the denomination of church that I belong to doesn't even recognize this program. Right. So I totally laughed at someone. I said, so you don't want someone with an education, you need somebody with an indoctrination. That wins no favor. So I want it kind of for me. I'm the only member of my family that hasn't graduated college of some sort.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm a family idiot. And I really want this for me to show God, hey, I am serious. I know you put a call on me. I have no idea what I'm doing with it right now, but I want to do this. And the last 2 classes are apologetics, which they joke and said I could probably teach some of that anyway, and then ethics, which you have to do all the scripture memorization. And I so bad want to email Reverend Renya and say, so do we have to YouTube video?
You got the cliff notes I can get.
Yeah. Hold it right here.
Yeah. See, and I've actually started. I've got that calling too myself. And for me, it was what stopped me. I mean, I'm 29 years old. Halfway through that era. What's that? Yeah, still a puppy. But halfway through this year, and I've been wanting to do this since I was in my early 20s. I just personally couldn't afford it, and I was like, okay, well, I was putting it off to the side, and I actually came across, I have a certificate hanging up on the wall, biblicaltraining.org. It's similar. They don't go as much in depth with it. You got to pay like $150 registration fee, but after that, they don't give you any degrees, but you do have educational credits. As I said, they gave me a certificate for completing theological studies. So to me, that was a good start. And then, I came across Christian Leaders Institute, and I was like, holy cow, this is the real McCall. And, it is accredited. They say they've told me that. It's on the website. There's a little introduction course to their classes. Unless there's been any changes, last I checked, they had at least 2 seminaries, which I don't necessarily want to say promoted them, but they supported the organization and the education in which this organization, Christian Leaders Institute, is also providing. So that, to me, was a trigger. I says, okay, they're accredited, they're recognized, let's go through it. So, I mean, it's definitely worth it. When you have the call, you just do it. You do what you can to make it possible, which is exactly what I was doing before I got this. And then here I see, it's like, man, I can get myself an actual degree. So. But yeah, I mean, I just want to throw that out there to the watchers. If that's something they feel called to do, to get involved in a theological education. It's basically seminary grade. I thought it was important for them to check out. With that being said, I'm done rambling. Let's get this party started. So, I don't know, I guess we'll start with trick-or-treating, also known as souling. I just said, I've got like a couple sentences, a small paragraph at best for all of this. I figured, you've kind of had the whole education behind this, so I'll kind of let you lead the ball.
So, with the rite of Samhain, which we discussed last week, the pagan Celtic festival of Samhain, which is where Halloween came from. They had what they would do was called souling. And people would dress up and they would go around and they would get, I got a screen up here that's got weird things happening.
That's all right. I've got like probably about 20 different tabs open. I had a hard time finding which ones I actually needed for this broadcast.
I was like looking at my brain. So people would dress up and they would go around and they would get pastries and things in exchange for promises to pray for the people who had died. And back in when they were doing it, it was called souling, but it was also called mumming, M-U-M-M-I-N-G.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're me and you live on the East Coast, we have what's called every year a mummers parade. And ours is Saturday on the 27th, I believe, this year. And it's this great big Halloween parade where the town I live in has the largest on the East Coast nighttime parade. It's the big Alsatia Mummers Parade. It's insanity how many people show up for this thing. And they will toss candy as the parade route goes, and people dress up in their costumes. And so what started as, praying for the dead to become even parades in our society.
Right.
So the fun part is the phrase trick-or-treating doesn't even appear until the 1920s. And it originated in America. November 4th, 1927, a Canadian journalist wrote this thing about kids going door to door dressed as little tormentors, and they are demanding food. They can either do a trick or they get a treat.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like kid blackmail. We went from praying to kid blackmail to parades, and that doesn't describe a whole lot of other things happening. I don't know what it does. So the concept of the trick or treat or the souling and praying for the dead. Again, we did kind of go over this a little bit the last time, but the dead are already dead. Jesus even said, "Let the dead bury their dead."
Right.
And if we feed the hungry like we're called to do by the Bible, there's no reason to go around begging for food anyway. So that's kind of where trick-or-treating started, was with this whole souling and going around and, I'll pray for people in your family who died. And trick-or-treat is where the souling is where some of the other things of Halloween kind of bounced off of. Trick-or-treat's kind of the springboard for some of the other things, like costumes and haunted houses and things.
Mm-hmm. So, what I found out, I'd have to look that up, but what I found out here is that trick-or-treating was mostly, you're right, it's saying here it's blackmail, but, it's kind of interesting to think about. From what I found, was that, it was one of the ways on which it would come into play, or that it was used, was that, these children, these homeless, these poors, that they would, essentially what you're saying, we'll give you a trick or a prank. There's one in particular commentary that said that they would, as a distraction kind of thing, you'd have some people that are coming knocking on the front door. They're saying, hey, will you give us candy or give us food in general because we're poor. Meanwhile, you got a kid in the back that's breaking into the kitchen.
Yeah.
But there was that aspect, and from my understanding is there wasn't not anything that was completely harmful, other than the fact that it was a bunch of kids or people in general that was just trying to feed themselves. And then, so, the commentary was, okay, you either feed their kids or you got a couple things missing from your garbage. So, overall, from my understanding, the action itself, now you're talking a little bit more, I think a little bit more into the spiritual aspect of it. Right. But if that was specifically it, with what I was shared, I don't necessarily see it being that. That alone would be harmless fun right there. But, where specifically do you see the danger, or what's from a spiritual sense? I don't know what my question is going to be here. Where do you see this
origin of the thing as far as the spiritual background?
Yeah, that's where I'm going at.
That before it became just poor kids going around asking for soul cakes, it was absolutely terrified villagers laying food at their doors and hoping the demons would take them in appeasement to be able to stay alive.
Okay, so the trick was ultimately for the spiritual realm. Take this tree, and it's also a trick just to keep me alive. Was this the staying alive for another year that we were talking about last time?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure here.
And the druids would help foster that fear in them. Like, okay, you have to do this. Leave food out, kind of thing. And
Brian Killer just chimed in. How you doing, man? Thanks for chiming in. As you can see here, we got Tammy in here. She's kind of teaching the class here. So if you got any questions, feel free to chime in, and we'll go ahead and throw those in there as much as we can. Tammy, go ahead.
Is that Reverend Keller?
Maybe. That's him.
Okay. So, when you look at anything and you think, oh, this is just cute stuff, what real harm is it?
Mm-hmm.
And you can go back and you can look at what appears to be an origin, like kids begging for food. All right, that does in fact appear harmless. But
right.
What is the origin? Like, where is this thing 100% completely founded?
Right.
It was founded in a druidic fear practice of the line between the dead and the undead is so completely thin right now that you're going to get drugged kicking and screaming alive into hell unless you do something to appease these ghosts and demons and dead people. So if you leave some food out, you'll get left alone.
Right.
The last time I looked, Jesus never scared anybody into heaven.
No. Well, and one of the things I'm curious about, I think we talked about this a little bit more in the last episode, but in the last episode you mentioned there, in that era, there's summer, or there's the warm weather, the warm season, and there's the cold season. And this time of the year is kind of like that transition. We're flipping the board, so it's like you're saying, it's that thin line, between the seasons. Now, is this just a one day kind of thing, 24 hours or even 12 hours, or just like a whole week thing when this thin line, if you want to call it that, is there?
For the Druids, it was a one-day thing. It was October 31st. And with the Greeks, it was November 2nd. So the Catholics jumped in and said, hey, let's make it a 3-day thing. They initiate All Saints' Day on the 1st. And boom, now you have a 3-day pagan festival of 3 different religions all slurred together in a massive paganism.
Right. Now, do you think that these establishment of these 2 other holidays would interfere or would change the time period of this so-called thin line, or is this just a solid one-day kind of concept?
Well, let me answer the question with the question.
I hate that.
Yeah, well, remember, it's a Jewish thing. So, how many All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day displays do you see out there versus Halloween displays?
That's a very good point. You only see 0.
Right. Well, there's
a little bit different over there.
For me, that's very Catholic, and it's ridiculous right now.
Yeah. Speaking of which, hold on. I know you can't see me on camera right now. I was cleaning my place up a little bit. Like I told you, those who are checking out my place behind me, nice little Star Wars display. Anyways, I came across a box, and I told my girlfriend I was going to share this with you. She told me to throw this away. And I think it's the funniest thing. I mean, I have no reason to have this. It would be in the trash, but I see it more as an ultimate joke. I was at I think it was Barnes and Noble's earlier this year, and I originally bought this to give to an old pastor.
That's a Star Wars.
And one of the things, I ended up keeping it. I actually forgot about it, but the reason I bought it is, as a joke. And what it is, keep in mind, she told me to throw it away, and it's something she can't stand to hear about. It's a bobblehead. Well, I see that face on you, and it's actually a bobblehead of, for those who can see, if I can get it on there, let me actually pull up the proper feed. What's that?
I brought it up on the screen. I just had to mute the channel.
Did you? It is Pope Francis. Oh, no, get this. Hold on. Since you got this up, I don't know where you're at in the feed, but it also comes with a little booklet. And this is the part which really triggered her. On the front of it, if I can get up there close enough, it says, "Who am I to judge?" Now, I did a podcast episode about that a couple of weeks ago, maybe earlier this in the summer. But if any of those people actually do know the scriptures, there is a certain level of judgment in which the believer is supposed to do. So this little bobblehead, while I find a good laugh out of it, is straight up just heresy. But I told her I'd share that with you. I thought it was the funniest thing. Brian Keller says no comment on Pontiff. He's keeping his comments.
Keller wants to see the cat.
So, but yeah, there's my little side note there as far as the Catholicism goes, and I'm really not sure what to do with them. I see it as a fun laugh, but at the same time, I don't really have much interest in them. I feel kind of left out here. I feel like I need to go get my lizard.
No.
Yeah. Okay, so I forgot where we left off.
Trick-or-treating, to me, is the whole... It started as a fear factor, shock motivation by pagans to continue systematic...
to keep the religion in check.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the time that Christians actually made it into these areas, there was so much generational cursing going on with these practices that they had to find some way to incorporate it. And this is what they came up with.
Right.
Souling.
So, now, I guess we're going to be kind of getting into this more next week. In fact, I've got a lot of commentary myself that I'd like to share. I guess just to ease some curiosities for those who might be chiming in, but may not be able to make it next week. Trick-or-treating in general. Is this something you see as a safe thing that we can do or not?
I say no.
Okay. It
comes down to, do I believe what the Bible says about what God says about what happens when you die,
mm-hmm.
and what happens to the body, etc., etc., or do I believe an old wives' tale, which, again, the Bible says don't believe the tales of the old wives,
right?
And wonder if I'm going to get drug kicking and screaming one night a year alive into the underworld by the demons.
Right.
So,
well, I personally have to agree with you on that. Which again, we can get more into this next week. And Brian, your comment here, Hallelujah Night. I think there's one of the other ones. What do we have? Fall Festival. It's a festival name in which churches try to use. Harvest Festival. We got those around here as well.
Retreat.
Yeah. I'd like to actually, I got a lot of commentary I'd like to share on that, but again, we'll save that for next week. But Jack-o'-lanterns here, so this one here is my personal, is an interest one. And now what I have here, my comment, I'm going to share this, and then you can go ahead and fill in the gaps.
Okay.
But what I found here says that Jack-o'-lanterns, by those who made them, the lanterns were variously said to represent the spirits or supernatural beings, and were also used to ward off evil spirits. For an example, sometimes they were used by Halloween geysers. I'm not 100% sure. Disguisers, I believe, is where that term itself is coming from.
The disguisers, again, costumes.
Okay. So the geysers would be the ones that were in the costumes, is what you're saying there. It was used to frighten people, and sometimes they were set on windowsills to keep the harmful spirits out of one's homes. And it has also been suggested that the jack-o'-lanterns originally represented, now keep in mind I'm replacing this, this article said to represented the Catholic souls in purgatory, or I'm sorry, the Christian souls in purgatory, but for those who are of the Christian faith, we know that purgatory doesn't exist. So I personally would have to reword this to say that it has also been suggested that these jack-o'-lanterns were originally represented by Catholic souls in purgatory. But that's personally all I found, or all I've actually pulled out. I figured I'd kind of leave the spotlight to you. And the will of the wisps. That's another thing. Did you have comments on that, or am I throwing that in there myself?
So, it wasn't originally pumpkins.
Oh, that I did not know.
It was turnips. There are no pumpkins in Ireland.
Okay. I actually read about the turnips. I didn't know that they weren't involved. I thought it was whatever you felt like using, but...
No. Pumpkins, when the potato blight happened and the Irish immigrants came over, they brought this tradition with them for carving the turnip, but turnips weren't as plentiful as pumpkins, so they carve pumpkins. Okay. I'm actually going to try and put up a YouTube video this week myself about pumpkins and duck hunting.
Pumpkins and duck hunting.
It makes sense. So, eventually.
All right.
So, there was a man named Stingy Jack. And how much of this is mythology, how much of this is true, always up to the interpretation of the end here. So, Stingy Jack was an alcoholic who didn't like to pay for his drinks.
Okay.
So, the devil decided that he was going to claim Stingy Jack's soul. So he disguised himself as a coin and put himself in Stingy Jack's pocket. What he didn't realize was that Stingy Jack had a crucifix in the same pocket. So that was how Stingy Jack contained the devil. See how many problems we have already?
All right, so hold on. Satan himself disguised himself as a coin.
As a coin to buy alcohol.
And to, his surprise, this pocket he's chilling out in, sitting nice and cozy, also has a cross in it.
Crucifix.
Crucifix.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So he has a crucifix and a devil coin in his pocket, and he goes to pay for his drink, and the devil pops out and says, you have to release me, because I can't be here anymore. This whole crazy thing. And Stingy Jack says, well, when I die, I'm not coming to hell. You have to promise me that. And the devil says, okay, I can promise you that. So Stingy Jack dies, and he makes it to heaven. And God says, well, you didn't do enough good, whatever, I can't accept you. So he can't go to heaven, and he has the promise from the devil that he can't be in hell. So the devil's laughing at him, and in a moment of pure demonic, he kicks this coal at him. And Stingy Jack picks the coal up and carves out a turnip and puts the coal in it. And he wanders the marshes with this live coal in a turnip for all eternity. And the will o' the wisp is partly people seeing it's gas that comes up out of the ground in the bogs. And they just assumed it was this guy, Stingy Jack, walking for all eternity with this lamp made out of a turnip and a demon coal. So, that's how the whole thing started, was carving faces into turnips to ward off Stingy Jack.
Okay.
To keep him from coming in. And the thing that I don't think the average person carving a pumpkin knows is that there are actual demons associated with this. There's a really good video that another former Satanist put up about Halloween and why we shouldn't do Halloween. You may have even watched it. And he talks about the demon associated with carving the pumpkins, and how when you do this, you are giving a legal authority to that demonic entity to come into your house and reside. And
right.
It's a demon of divisiveness. There is no peace. And I can't understand why anyone who is of Christ would feel the need to bring that into their house.
Right.
So,
Well, and we talked a little bit about a little bit about that. Actually, no, we did. Yeah, we did. Me and you, a personal conversation via Facebook Messenger. There's a few things in there in which, bringing things into your house, which we commented on. We'll probably go over that a little bit more. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I'm censoring myself because I'm kind of saving that for the grand finale.
yeah.
Let me give me a minute here. There's a book.
While you're on that, I got a rabbit trail for you.
Go ahead. I can't find that book. I think it's in another room, and I'm crying because it's out of view of the broadcast.
There's this deadly fungus. There's hardwood trees, and there's this weird fungus that grows at the base of them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this stuff will flat kill you if you touch it. It's bright orange, and it's called the jack-o'-lantern. They named this deadly fungus after this.
Oh, that's awesome.
Get a pumpkin, whatever.
Yeah. So, if I want to keep people away from me, just take some of this moss and rub it around my face or something, and
That'll get you going off too, though. I don't know. I was thinking of like taking my darts and tipping them, but that's not nice.
Great idea. Hey, Brian, that article you're talking about. If it's the same one you shared, I don't know. I think it was either yesterday or today. I'll go ahead and share that. We got about another 30 minutes, and we're going to kind of close up here. But that article itself, I'll go ahead and share. I did see that. I got to read it myself. I'm a little curious. See what we got in there. Yeah, just side note right there. I just want to kind of let you know that. I'm losing track here. I'm getting distracted by so many different ways. See, this is what's good about bringing like a broadcast team into play. Is you got somebody. There's a podcast I watched. He actually, I just ate my last gummy saver. I'm sad. There's a podcast I watch in which this gentleman, he's got at least 2 other people. I'm not sure what they do, but I think it's kind of interesting. There's one that at least looks up some of these articles, and another one he does whatever. I'm not really sure what he does. Maybe just sits there and looks pretty. But or maybe he monitors, administrates it. It'd be kind of cool to see. And I guess that's where we're going with. Those who feel compelled to partner up with this, feel free. We need some monitor stuff going on here. Bobbing for apples, and I threw in here some things on this. I'm not sure where you were going with this, but I threw these kind of in the same quote-unquote category. You have that, and that one, honestly, I've had a thought pop into my head on this specific issue. And give me a second here. I need to see yeah, okay, so that alone, when I was reading this, and I put it down, I'm not 100% sure if it'd really be appropriate to share. Druidic cauldrons, you mentioned as having origins. I apparently spelled it wrong here. And modern divination. I was personally curious about that. Like, what was your direction for that one? But let's take them one at a time. We got bobbing for apples, cauldrons, and then, as I said here, divinations. And there's 2 more issues I'd like to cover too, if we can get to them.
Okay. So, bobbing for apples, and if we want to keep the same, like, okay, this is the cute thing we do now.
Mm-hmm.
This is where it kind of was, and then this is where it really should be.
Right.
So the cute thing we do now is we get a bucket or something, and we throw a bunch of apples in it, and everybody dips their face in and grabs one. And what has kind of been left out of all that process is they used to take and put people's initials on the apple.
Okay.
So for apple you got, that was who you were supposed to marry. This was a singles only game.
See, and I kind of remember, I don't even know if this really relates or if this is actually an accurate practice, but I remember seeing something. I used to watch the TV show Charmed as a kid. There's one bit in there which the girls went back in time, or they were cast back in time. I can't remember how they got back there, but the girl which she's in love with this guy. In their own time period, it's 2000s. There's a guy she's got a crush on. She's got no idea about his demonic history. But Cole, his she's assuming that this guy himself is in the back in a different time period. But surprise, it's the same character. What he's taking, he peels off a piece of an apple, and based on how you peel an apple, you pretty sure of what letter's going to come out of that. But he ends up dropping this apple or this peel that he's cutting off into the water, and surprise, there's a seed that comes out. Oh my gosh, that's so. Yeah, I mean, you cut something round. What are you going to get off of that? You're going to get something round. But anyways, lover is named Cole, and you know. Is that kind of relate? Like, is that something that's like legit? I mean, I think you're kind of going on the same direction, but a different angle.
Well, the other thing they would do is they would get the apple out, then they would cut it in half, and then they would take 2 seeds out, and they'd put one on each eyelid, and then they'd wait and see which one fell off first. They would have to say 2 names, whichever one fell off first, that was who you were going to marry. And who's to say you can't, like, you know, do one
right. Force it out.
Oh, look, it's totally, you know, great. But that's kind of what it became into. But the Greeks had a festival to Pomona, and Pomona is her thing is apples. There was this whole apple festival for this Greek goddess, and it included a lot of overall adults, a lot of sex rights, and a lot of you shouldn't be doing it in church kind of stuff.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure this article I have, this little section here, I think it's kind of going in the direction that I think it's going then. Yeah. Okay, I just looked her up a little bit of, you know, the Greek goddess Pomona, and I'm pretty sure
the Christians, because at that point they have lived so long in the old area that when they come up into Ireland, into the Druid-infested area, they already have knowledge of this apple thing. And the Druids are doing an apple thing. But the Druid apple thing is, like, way worse. They took a cauldron of oil at the start of the day, and they put it on a bonfire, which is a whole other thing,
right,
at the edge of the bog. And they'd have a couple guys watching it, and the rest of them would go out in the village. I think they had like a 10-mile radius or something, whatever. And they would ask the villagers, is there anyone you have to accuse for witchcraft? And it was free reign. Like, if you just didn't like, you know, Ted down the street, bye-bye. So they would get these people together, and they would take them down to the edge. And this time, it's nightfall. This pot of oil has had all day to come to a full boil. And Druids would take an apple, and they would toss it in. And if you could get that apple out of that boiling oil, you were not guilty. Wow. So, if you chose not to do it, you were issued as a human sacrifice.
So either one, you claim guilty, and you're dead.
Yep.
Or 2, you prove your innocence by getting your face burnt off.
Yes, and if you did survive, and believe it or not, hard to not fathom this, but most of them ran right into the bog to stop the burning flame and suffocated because there's no way to breathe.
Right.
If they even survived that, plus the ensuing infections, because, I mean, let's face it, they were using things like urine for medication at that point in time. You're permanently disfigured. Everybody knows what you've been through. Everybody knows what you've been accused of. Most committed suicide. So, you know, do you really want to do bobbing for apples knowing it originated as a form of human sacrifice?
Right. Now, do you know personally how long ago this specific practice, like where it started? Like, is it like BC, AD?
For the Druid aspect, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, that I'm a little curious. But I mean, in general, you know, there's really, at that time period where stuff like this would originate, there's really not the best medical practices. Yeah, so we're, you know, we're kind of screwed either way. And plus, you know, having that, having those scars, you know, shows that you also have a reputation. So even if you're innocent or guilty, you're still known for it.
You're not finding a job.
Right.
You know, no one's going to give to you if you're a beggar. So yeah,
right. Yeah, and if you want to take the biblical aspect out of it, you know, you'd be also considered unclean for this as well, and therefore, you know, okay, you can't be a part of this community because you're infected.
Yep. Pretty much.
What about this modern divination that you were talking about, that you commented on? Where are you going with that?
Oh, that was for like who you're going to marry thing. Like when you're about for apples, and it was the whole.
Oh, so the whole thing is coming together.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, this commentary. This is the same concept. Try to bite and float. Okay. Yeah, there's. I guess pretty much I have the same stuff now. The thing I don't think you shared. Similar actually, but girls who placed. I don't know if this is partial or if this is all that was there. But this line here says the girl who placed the apple. They placed the apple. They bobbed under the pillow. I'm assuming this is a different culture because I don't necessarily see somebody with a scarred face doing this. But the woman who placed the apple in which they bobbed for, they placed it under their pillow, and it was said that they'd have a dream of their future lover.
Yeah, I've heard of that one too.
What's that?
I've heard of that one too.
Yeah, that one's. This is personally new to me. But it's all fairly interesting. The only thing I can relate to as far as the jack-o'-lanterns go is Ichabod Crane. That's personally all I can tell you about that. Now here's one that we'll go into this one specifically a little bit more next week. And I think this one here relates back to the trick-or-treating. We got the costumes, which we can actually overlook this one because I want to get to this last one before we run out of time. The costumes here. This was impersonating. Was it AOC? Am I pronouncing that properly?
Close enough.
Okay. Now, for those who are chiming in here, this from my understanding here, these were supernatural beings, which in the superstition were also the souls of the dead, or in another superstition, because they're either supernatural beings or the souls of the dead. They can't really be both. And they received offerings on their behalf, impersonating beings, like you said, to protect themselves. Now, here's the big one. The big one we have here. This is one, and again, the one that I was going to tie into this. Again, we can talk more about this next week. Ouija boards. What kind of board? I got 2 comments here to share, but I'm a little curious what kind of history you got to share with me on that. Teach me your ways, oh great master.
All right, so we had one, and I personally know what it's like to be sitting there, and the little thing that moves around is called a plectron.
Say that again, because I have this word here, and I couldn't even figure out how to pronounce it.
A plectron.
Okay, different word. Never mind.
Okay, so and you have 2 people and you put 2 fingers on it, and you light candles, whatever, because everything has to be dark and spooky.
Right, and candles help everything.
More than you know. And you agree on a question, and then you just kind of gently put your fingers there, and it goes around, and it spells things, or there's yes and there's no, and there's numbers, and you get whatever answer. I have actually seen where we had taken our hands off, and it just started doing its own thing, and it was spelling stuff out, and we were quick writing the letters down, and it was things like, I can kill you all right now.
Right.
I don't even remember half of what, but that's the one that stood out. I could kill you all right now. And that's how demons are right there in the room with you.
Right.
And then I know what it's like to see one just come off the board and fly and smash into the wall all on its own. There's nobody touching it. I've seen the edges of a Ouija board start to go up in smoke a little. And then craziest story was...
Give me a second here. Brian, as far as joining in on the Skype call, we're actually going to be closing up here after this, but if you'd like to, you can join in as a number 3 next week. I'd love to hear from you. I haven't talked to you in a bit. Tammy, feel free to continue. I'm done interrupting.
So one night, my mom and I decided that we were going to ask... We were talking... It was some weird thing about, we wanted to know who my protector was, who was watching over me, and it spelled out a name of one of the higher ranking demons.
Okay.
And because I was in witchcraft at the time, I thought that was cool.
Right.
So Mom had no idea what that was, and if you ask my mother to this day, this was all just a phase I went through. It was awesome. And so we asked who my mother's protector is, and it spells out God. and we like completely freaked out. We turned on all the lights. We put the thing away. It was so crazy, and it's weird because that's one of those few times where I think the demons had to answer with the truth because God really was in the room. I mean,
right.
Because God is omnipresent and He's everywhere. You know, He's everywhere. The demons are protecting His chosen.
Right.
So that was one of those crazier moments that I've had. And with the Ouija boards, they are sold as toys. They are sold in, well, it was Toys R Us, rest in peace. They were
actually, I'd have to get back to you on this, but I'm pretty sure Toys R Us might be making a comeback. I saw something a few weeks ago. I saw something a few weeks ago that, hey guys, don't lose hope, we're coming back.
But they sell Ouija boards in the kids section as toys. Mm-hmm. There's a little pop-up shop in our local mall that sells puzzles and calendars and goofy toys every year at the holiday season. And they sell Ouija boards. It's like right there every year, Ouija boards. I'm trying to find it on my desk, but I have a thing for mints and tins.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is a thing with me. And last year, there was a candy company that put out tins of mints that were mini Ouija boards. Oh, use the mint to go around the Ouija board. I about had a heart attack. Like, I emailed the company, like, why are you doing this?
Right.
I never heard back. I wasn't expecting to. But these are a gateway straight into hell. This is pure divination. It's not a game. It's not something to do with sleepovers and slumber parties. Mm-hmm. It is straight up into the demonic, and it is that doorway that they need to get into your life and to have a foothold. You know, if you want to know something God's saying, you got it right here.
Right. Yeah.
And if this isn't good enough for you, maybe try talking to Him, because whatever He says to you about whatever you just asked will be backed up by this.
Yeah, and that's I want to throw that out there. You know, as a little commentary. You know, one of the things, or a side note, I guess, is because I had a conversation briefly. Well, you put some comment on there about the women in ministry, and one of the things that kind of concerned me was the other lady who commented was my aunt. You know, if God calls it to happen, then let it be. But yeah, we'll get to that at another point. But the thing that concerned me is, the biggest thing that I think it's very important that people recognize is when God calls you to do something. You know, as a believer, as a child of God, when He calls you to do something for Him or pursue a certain kind of ministry or anything that relates to the servitude of God, not one moment, not one action, not one position of any sort will any of it go against His Word. If it does go against what God has to say, then that's how you know it is not from God. And sometimes it depends on the passage, because there's some times where passage A says, okay, God is saying this, but what I'm really seeing is God is calling me to do option B. I personally could say very few. I haven't come across many, but there are some cases in which it does seem conflicting. But when that happens, it's important for us to go back into God's Word and find out what passage A is really saying. Does it really relate? But one of the ways, a couple of ways in which you can find out what God is saying here is, one, in His Word, two, through somebody else. I've actually had a couple people give some instructions to me that happened in that way, and I thought it was really cool. Ironically, one of them was a Wiccan, another one was an atheist.
Well, he used Nebuchadnezzar, so...
Yeah, it was my, the call to ministry was done, which I thought that was kind of cool, but in general, he can use it a couple different ways. His Word, other people. One of the favorite ones, which, to me, I love, is probably my favorite one, because it shows that it might not be where I'd like to be, but I'm directed on the right path, or at least, because there's sometimes the Christian himself would feel, they feel lost. I feel like they need guidance, or they need to get get right with God, however you want to word it. You just feel like you're distanced too much than what you need to be. So when you hear God's voice, for me, that's an affirmation of, I'm on the right track. Now, all through our lives, we're going to come across something where we don't feel like we're up to par, or we should be. Yeah. But it's important. I think to hear God's voice is such one of the greatest blessings. And for those of you who don't know, one of the ways you can tell, still small voice. And if I was to give any sort of description behind this, it would be like when you're thinking to yourself, the sound that you hear from your own thoughts. It sounds like that, but there's a subtle difference, and a difference enough to where you recognize that it's not you, but that it's something else. I
would add to that. What is the voice that you know best? What's your best guess? What voice do you know the best?
My own.
See, that's it. And
yes.
That subtle difference is that God will take your own voice inside yourself and be like, okay, this is what we're going to do now. Mm-hmm. And I've had a lot of this is what we're going to do now. And I'm like, I rebuke you, Satan. And he's like, yeah, no, wrong one.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah. No,
well, and that's where it's important to really know the Word of God, because we all know that, Satan himself, he knows the Bible just as well as the Christian does. Just as well as God, the man who wrote it down. He can read it whenever he wants. But as we find out, in Jesus' 40 days, that he can use Scripture against. He did it with Eve as well. And then, he's also noted to masquerade as an angel of the light. So he himself can portray himself to be divine. He is divine, but to be good.
Yeah, and he has no problem whatsoever appearing to whoever he needs to appear to as somebody very attractive, someone very desirable, mm-hmm. to get them to do what he wants them to do.
Right. Now, that's actually something I'd like to talk more about. And I don't even know how many notes I'm going to be coming across with. I'm going to spend the week typing these suckers up for next week. But let's go ahead and actually leave that right there, for next week, because it seems like that's kind of what we're transitioning into right now. For those of you who are chiming in, Tammy, I want to thank you. I'll talk to you in a minute. Unless you had any other commentaries you'd like to share.
No. I have my own YouTube channel. Not real hard to find.
All right.
Tammy Giberson. And so I'm going to, from here on in, be putting up just real short clips, trying to keep them under 15 minutes, different teachings.
Good luck with that. I've actually already tried. It doesn't work.
30
minutes minimum is what I got going on.
I'm an introvert, so believe it or not, this is actually a huge thing for me. Yeah. My kids laugh that I agreed to do this. I'm like, shut up. And so, in Jesus' name. But the next thing I'm going to put up is, in fact, on the duck hunting. And
duck hunting and pumpkins, right?
Duck hunting and pumpkins, yes. Well, that may seem preposterous. There is an actual scriptural basis for that. So if you want to, jump over and check that out, that's fine. But I'm going to start putting up more stuff on some of my history and why I'm confident speaking out the way I am against the agents of darkness.
Right. Awesome. I'd actually love to hear about that. And I really do look forward to talking more on this next week. I'll have to share more with you. Can't even talk right. I'll have to share more about that next week and maybe a little bit more after this broadcast here. But Tammy, thank you. Ricola. I know. I was really wanting to say that earlier because it's like one of those things that every time you hear it, it's something you have to do. But Tammy, thank you for chiming in. I'll talk to you here in a minute. For those of you guys who are wrapping up here, that you've lasted so long in such a beautiful podcast, fun podcast, I want to thank you all for joining in. If you have any questions, comments about anything that we've shared in this podcast, please do get a hold of us, and we'll be more than happy to share with you. We'll be more happy to share our thoughts and help get some of your curiosities settled. If you enjoy these podcasts, please do consider becoming a subscriber. You can check us out on Facebook. You can go to our website, christiancornerstone.org. You can check us out on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to our channel. We'll have a video out every single week unless scheduled conflicts. Next week we're going to be going over the biggest question of all: how should the Christian respond to the holiday of Halloween? Now again, I want to close up here. You know, if you feel compelled to support this ministry financially, please do consider that. You can do that by going to our website, christiancornerstone.org, and going to the support us page and click the big old red arrow and get started. Any questions, comments, concerns about that as well, feel free to get a hold of me, and I'll be glad to ease your curiosities. With that being said, you guys have yourself a very wonderful weekend, and God bless.